how do we balance the number of farms and the number of cows that we have whilst maintaining increases in milk yield? And that's the challenge. How do you do more with less?
I'm Matt Cooper, and this is Bite Sides. Welcome to our latest edition of the AusFine Bite Sides podcast. We've got a very special guest in today, a superstar of the dairy industry.
I'll take that.
Today we have Eliza Redfern from Dairy Australia. Eliza, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very grateful for you to come in today and spend your Tuesday morning with us. Let's start at the start.
Yeah.
It's always a good place to begin.
Sure is.
Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up being in Dairy Australia and how long you've been with Dairy Australia?
Yeah, perfect. So I've been at DA for about 5 years now, and it wasn't like I said to myself, I want to be an analyst, and that was always the goal. I sort of had a bit of a weird pathway coming into this, but I was working at a vet clinic a while ago and always thought my pathway would be going into vet science.
Okay.
And I feel like there's a lot of people in that area that sort of have that mindset, especially when you're doing vet nursing, you're at school and things, thinking about where your career is going to go. So that was kind of always the plan for me. And the year that I was entering into uni was when Melbourne Uni decided they would make the agriculture degree a pathway into vet science. So obviously can't get the crazy marks to get straight into vet. And so then I decided to go with the ag degree and to see where it goes and potentially use that as a pathway. And I got about 6 months into it and I fell in love with it. And I thought there's a lot of different opportunities to work with animals. Granted, I'm not working with animals today in my current role, but definitely saw the opportunity within it and all the different industries. And so found through doing the subjects that whenever it came to the dairy subject, I just had a natural passion for it, and I was remembering the stats and the figures, and which obviously plays quite well into my current role today. But thought I'd stick with that. Stuck with the pathway, decided to see where it would take me. And when I left uni, I went and worked for a corporate dairy company. So I was on farm in South Australia, down in Millicent for a little while. So
had you had any exposure to dairy before the
nothing.
degree?
No, nothing
You're a
at all.
Melbourne girl?
Yeah, just from the eastern suburbs. So I think my nana had a dairy farm, when she was a kid, which was a very long time ago. And I think a lot of people sort of have that similar pathway. But that was sort of the only connection that I really had. So not really from that ag background at all. So kind of got into it that way. So it was definitely eye-opening going from living in the suburbs to living on farm and working on farm down there. A lovely place on earth. It is very, very gorgeous down there.
It is beautiful.
And
absolutely.
Big farm too. So
how many cows?
About 1,200 at the time they were milking. So milkings were about 5.5 hours long. So going from never having done it before straight into it.
So you were down doing the milking yourself?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, calf rearing, milking, droving.
Oh, wow.
Everything. So, my arm muscles were awesome during that time. But, have never been able to replicate that in the gym, unfortunately. Had an absolute blast doing that. And so it was part of a structured grad program. And so also came back to Melbourne, spent a bit of time in head office and sort of getting across that corporate side of dairy and how that all works. But I, as that program was coming to an end, I was sort of thinking about, okay, where do I want to take my career? And the mindset was always to start on the production level and just see where I could go. And a lot of roles within agriculture, you're consulting, you're advising farmers. So it's really good to have that experience on the ground level before you go off and do anything else. But I realised I had no idea what happened to the milk as soon as it left the farm gate. And I had absolutely no experience in that space. And a role to join DA as an industry analyst popped up. And I thought, this is perfect. You can learn about the whole supply chain. Obviously got the job. And so, that was about 5 years ago. And now I'm leading the team. So analysis and insights manager at DA. So
amazing. That is a fantastic journey. I guess having that insight of, from putting the cups on at milking and calving at all hours of the day and morning, I dare say, challenging, but gives you a huge amount of insight and empathy, I guess, to the dairy farmers.
Oh, absolutely. Like it just gives you a great idea in terms of how it all works. And of course, every farm is different and every system is different and every region is different. So there's all those small little differences, depending on location and things. But yeah, even just to have that small time that I did, working on farm, it definitely a big appreciation for sort of how it all works, how it comes together and all the little decisions, how they all add up to effectively run this whole business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I want to ask you a question just about Dairy Australia in a second, but before we go too much further, just that was interesting. Melbourne Uni, you were saying, or offered that ag science pathway.
Yeah.
And having a conversation with Barry Irvin last week, and just we thought of the need for our industry to have that, that great pathway of talent coming through and seeing agriculture as a really viable industry to move into and get that talent and that entrepreneurial spirit coming through from university level.
Yeah.
Is that what that is kind of driven towards? And did you see much uptake from people becoming interested in ag?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was quite interesting doing the degree because it wasn't all kids from the regions. It was probably more city kids, if you will, doing it.
Yep.
And sort of seeing this area where there aren't many schools that offer agriculture as a year 12 subject. So it was very foreign to a lot of people. But it's obviously a great career pathway because everyone needs to eat, everyone needs food. And so this whole topic around food security, especially in this current environment where you've got people making huge trade policy decisions, and that whole food security aspect is really important. And so, working in agriculture is great from that perspective. And so I think that was a bit of a point that they sort of honed in on to all of us when we were at uni, is that, there's so many different industries just within agriculture as a whole. There's so many different pathways you can go. And I think it's that breadth of opportunity was attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's not necessarily a question. It's a comment. My two girls are in the later years of high school, and it's interesting that start talking about career paths and subject selection to lead into those careers. Ag never comes up.
Yeah, that's right.
It's this typical 20 industry kind of 20 different types of industry that people typically gravitate toward. They're all metro based. Be it engineering or science or, digital marketing or something like that. That's very narrow. And it's kind of an interesting observation. They never talk about ag. And I think it'd be a wonderful addition for someone to come in and start talking in that, planting that seed of, it's a big world out there, huge amounts of opportunities in lots of different areas. Anyway, that was just a side note. Okay, getting back to Dairy Australia, why don't we just take a step back, and for people who are watching or listening, what is Dairy Australia and what does it do? What does it do and what is it designed to do?
Yeah. So I think the formal answer is that Dairy Australia is the national services body for the industry. So we are an IDC, a Research Development Corporation, and so we are funded by levy money. So every dairy farmer pays a levy towards Dairy Australia. So that funds the work that the entire organisation does. And then there's also matching funds from the government as well, which is specifically for research and development activities. So not everything that DA does sort of falls within that specific group, but that's effectively how we're funded. So the farmers are obviously our key stakeholder. They're the ones that are funding the work that we do, and we're doing that work for them.
Interesting. So my experience with Dairy Australia is that it is you get participants from across the industry, including ourselves, being trading dairy products, Australian dairy products, as well as big manufacturers and processors that are also deeply engaged with Dairy Australia, and then obviously the huge amount of dairy farmers that pay the levy to Dairy Australia. Do you see from your observation that there is a natural tension there between the different participants in dairy and your engagement with them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's probably no secret that that industry unity piece definitely is an area for improvement. And that's something that we've seen over time. Obviously, the industry has developed a lot over the decades. We're not really in this period of farmer co-ops anymore. And so just from that part, the industry has changed quite dramatically. So the way in which we do things has changed. And ultimately, there is a bit of push and pull. And I think in my space, the work that we're doing, we're in the data and insights area. It's the benefit for farmers is very indirect, and we're trying to present them with data and information that can help them make more informed decisions. That's effectively what it comes down to for us and for my team. But ultimately, we have to work with people right across the supply chain in order to do that. Milk production is a great example of one of our data sets where we have to work with the processors and have really strong relationships with them in order to have those voluntary contributions within the data sets to make sure that we can then tell industry what's going on. Because if we didn't do that with them, the industry wouldn't know. We wouldn't know, what milk production is doing on a monthly basis. And it's obviously a really important tool. So, that's just one example. But we're definitely working right across the supply chain with all kinds of groups.
Yeah, it's that observation you made around the industry working together, again, getting back to that conversation that I've had with quite a few people here in the podcast, but also particularly with Barry Irvin from Bega last week, was very much around the unity of the industry.
Yeah.
You pointed out that we need some work, and he and I were in total agreement around that. There does seem to be a real fracture there between processors, dairy farmers, and other stakeholders in the industry, but we do need a united voice of some description. I think it's difficult for Dairy Australia to be that voice in many regards because of the way you guys are structured and funded in particular. But do you have any thoughts or insights on there as far as the Dairy Australia's role in that?
Yeah, I think, as you've mentioned, we often are in the middle of that. And so, there are conversations happening in terms of how does DA make that better. We've got a new CEO who's come on board, and so that's going to be part of his focus going forward is, looking at that and sort of where do we fit within that scheme and how do we make it better? Ultimately, everyone's got a responsibility to try to improve it. But it's a hard one. I don't have the solution,
no,
so I'm not sure who does. But
I don't think there is an easy solution.
Yeah.
If there was an easy solution, it would have been done.
Yeah.
So I think it's really hard in the way that you mentioned previously about the co-ops. That's where we've come from, a history of co-ops. So everything is kind of, even culturally, we're designed around a co-op model, but now there's very few co-ops left. So it's an interesting dynamic, and we're kind of still, I think, somewhat trying to find our way. But within that, it's difficult with different stakeholders pulling in different directions to get everyone together and have a united voice. I think that's just the very nature of it. But you've come into DA very much in the data analytics side of it. Yep. But I see you up there presenting at the Dairy Australia breakfast, again in a room that sometimes can be a little challenging, can we say? You do a very
depending on the season,
you do a great job, mind you, in presenting that into the breakfast. What has been your general takeaways over recent times with where the industry is sitting, and then maybe the trend line from when you first joined 5 years ago? Yeah,
that's a good question. Look, I think where we're currently at is centered around these general themes around market volatility, which throughout the last 5 years has definitely been key. I mean, I started just when the pandemic had begun. So that was obviously...
Great starting point.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I don't want to bring it back to the pandemic because that happens a lot. But, that was probably, I guess, a key point in terms of this area of volatility. And now we've obviously got, the President of the United States making all of these trade policy decisions, and that's having huge implications, for the whole industry, for the whole world, effectively, across many different industries. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around that. I don't want to say unprecedented, but there is sort of that element of that occurring.
True.
But there are just these constant themes that are coming through. So that's probably one key area, and then the climate side, and that's not a new story either. And agriculture has been dealing with that specifically for quite a long time, of course, and it is continuously changing and developing. And right now we're obviously in a situation with dry conditions in spots, and we've had flooding and wet conditions up north. So that's just the nature of Australia and the country that we are. But that's sort of, I guess, is the overarching or the umbrella for currently what's going on. And then within that, we've obviously seen strength in export prices. We've seen a little bit of a rebound within that retail space in terms of dairy products that are being sold. But of course, there's a lot going on within both of those markets and those areas. And then, of course, we're seeing, implications of climate on things like milk production and input costs as well. So there is a lot happening within the market at the moment. When isn't there? But there is a lot going on.
What's the general, if you could summarise the general vibe out there amongst dairy farmers, what would you say?
I think it would depend where they're located, first of all, and everyone's in a different boat in some ways. And even over this last season, one of the key differences we've seen with something like milk production has been the difference between farms that are more dryland and those that have got access to irrigation. And if you take like Gippsland as an example, for instance, they've had parts in the west and the south where conditions have been quite dry, but then you've got farms that are, in that McAllister irrigation district, and they've been saying, okay, well, costs are increasing and from an operational perspective, there are some challenges, but we're doing okay. So it really does depend on sort of what the exposure of that area has been. If you go down into West Vic, for instance, things are a lot more challenging down there, and the sentiment has definitely been weighed on by the climate and also income challenges over the last season particularly. So it really does vary, but I think that there is a lot of uncertainty in the area. There is a lot of challenge when we're talking about rising input costs. I mean, fodder is still a huge challenge for a lot of dairy farming businesses, and that pressure is unlikely to shift dramatically anytime soon. So that's something that's carrying into this new season. So I realise you asked me to summarise it, but I
think it's a valid answer, because the answer is there is no general.
Yeah.
It really depends on who you're talking to and where are they, and where their space is in their development. So are they an old, well-established farm, or are they new share farmers that have just taken on some ownership, etc. So each person, no doubt, is different. I guess in the general overview, it's always been all those challenges that you've just mentioned, be it climate or input costs or generational. It's always been it's a tough area to navigate, isn't it? Dairy farming, like, I think by its very nature, it can be very hard.
Yeah, it can be quite challenging. It's a very complex system as well, and sort of bringing it back to studying agriculture. When you compare dairy to the likes of cropping, or it might be sheep or whatever
beef.
it is, beef. The way in which the dairy industry operates and sort of some of those pressures and exposures, even if you just look at like the retail side of things, it's very different for dairy than it is for a lot of other industries. And so the fact, and something that I always liked about dairy and something I always said is, if you can understand dairy, you can understand anything, because for a dairy farmer, you've got to understand the pasture management side, potentially the cropping side. If you're looking at doing homegrown feed, all that kind of stuff, you obviously need to understand the animal management. There might be water management aspects as well, depending on if you're using irrigation and all those systems. So there's a lot within just dairy compared to those that, sit in a tractor and harvest a bit of grain at the end of every year. So
not to oversimplify our grain brethren,
right.
but
of course.
Listen, I make the same point, and particularly probably post farm gate, where the clock's ticking on this product, and we've got to do something with it very, very quickly, or else it's a waste.
That's right.
So the clock's ticking. Your cold chain management is crucial.
Yeah.
You have to turn it into something else very, very quickly, heat treat it, etc., which I don't think that time pressure is on a lot of other industries. And then the way it flows through to a retail shelf, basically treated as a loss leader by many retailers, as an example, to get people through the front door of a supermarket. position the cheese and the milk down the very back of the supermarket to make sure everyone's walking past all the other stuff where they make money.
Yep.
So therefore, there's always the margin pressure as well on dairy products.
Yeah, well, it's such a staple, isn't it? And I think, we often talk about the vast majority of Australian households purchasing and consuming milk, within the retail sector. And so it is that important category for the retailers, but it does mean that the way in which pricing is established on the shelves is very different, and that supply and demand relationship is not so simple when it comes to dairy and retail.
Yeah, no, exactly right. So getting back to, I guess, that vibe that I've spoken to before, that dairy farming is hard, and we've all got that picture in our mind of an aging dairy farmer who wants to pass it down to the next generation of kids, but the kids have gone off to university and in the city. Pursued another career that didn't mean they had to get up at 4 a.m. every morning and freezing cold or boiling hot, covered in flies, to do the milking. So again, that's that view of dairy farming being a very hard path to track. But coming to some of the breakfasts in the DA breakfast, you hear of some really entrepreneurial young farmers coming through who are really positive, and they're investing in their farms and purchasing new land and cattle, etc. So there is, again, I think there's a undercurrent of positivity of young farmers coming through. Yeah. I lament though a little bit that we're not hearing enough of those stories, and it's all the focus is on the dour and the costs and how hard it all is. Meanwhile, there are some really good stories there of where the industry could go, but
absolutely.
We're not hearing enough about it. Do you think, number one, do you agree? And number two, do you think that we could do more to promote those stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think there could be more done in that space, because they are out there, as you say, and we obviously had a great young farmer on our panel at the Brekkie event. And he's someone who's grown significantly within the dairy industry, and he's been able to find that opportunity for him and his family over the last, I think it was about 8 or so years that he's been in dairy. So those stories are out there.
That was the guy from Tassie, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he was great to listen to.
Yeah, he was fantastic, and he wasn't from the state himself. So there was that whole conversation around, where's the best region to do it? How do you make it work for your lifestyle? What your priorities are for your family? Those kinds of things. So there's a lot within that conversation itself. But what we know from the data that we have is that it's about roughly 50 to 60% of farmers who report that they're in a steady phase. And so we see that continuously year to year. And then we have roughly about 25% of farmers who are in that expansion phase. And so there's a lot.
So what was that percentage?
About 25% roughly.
In expansion
phase, yeah. And so that can fluctuate season to season. We've seen that come down a bit over the last year just because of the challenges around climate and some of that market uncertainty over the last season. So those numbers do fluctuate, but that's roughly the splits that we see within the farming area in terms of those priorities. And so there's multiple different ways in which, farmers can obviously invest on farm, and some might be looking to just, focus more on those minor to moderate scale. You might have others that are looking to do more major scale investments, and that might be, putting robots in or changing sheds up, whatever that might look like for their business. But there's definitely this focus around, trying to find that balance between how do we keep doing this and balance it for what we're trying to achieve here. And I think there is this increasing focus, and Dairy Australia has got the Our Farm, Our Plan program that's really focused on getting farmers to think about, okay, well, what are our goals here? What are we trying to achieve? And even if it is just trying to tweak the business for lifestyle purposes, then that's good. And then they can sort of make those changes accordingly. So yeah, we do see quite a bit of spread there. But the stories are out there. There definitely is investment happening, and especially in periods where we see that profits are growing, that's when we start to see some of those more moderate to major scale investments occurring on farm.
Do you think it's been an interesting last couple of weeks, you just talk about as farms become more profitable, obviously a lot of activity over the last month with new season milk pricing coming out. Where the pricing looks to settle, do you think farmers are typically profitable at these levels? I know, again, that's a broad sweeping statement. It depends on area, but generally speaking?
Yeah, look, I think the increase in farm gate milk prices is likely to support the profitability picture. They obviously moved quite a lot over the month of June from where they
sure
started
did.
at. There's also quite a spread out there too between the different processors. So obviously there is going to be quite a range there, and there are going to be farmers in some regions that have significant recovery costs from the drought, from floods. So that's obviously going to impact their margins.
Of course.
You've also got other farmers who have maybe come into this season and through feed management and other things, they might have been able to sort of mitigate some of that volatility within the market over the last season. So again, everyone's going to be in different positions, but I think overall that increase in farm gate milk prices will help support the profit. The question is more around where do input costs go over the season, and so there is still that pressure in the fodder space. Grain prices are a little bit weighed on from the global market at the moment, which has kept a bit of a lid on any increases in that space. But the questions around what's yields going to look like when we get to harvest towards the end of the year, how is that going to progress, and what's the impact on pricing there? We've seen fertilizer costs go up, energy, labour, those kinds of costs are all still up as well. So I think ultimately there is that good prospect for profitability over this season. It's just going to be balanced out with where input costs go.
Yeah, sure. Again, this is probably more a comment from my side than a question I can ask you.
Sure.
But
Yep.
I think that's it's great insights to hear the challenges around. You've got the one side, which is the income coming from milk, and then the challenges around the other input costs for a dairy farmer. I think from a processor point of view, having to commit to a price at the very beginning of a season is very challenging for a business. Again, I think it's quite unique to the dairy industry where you're locking in a minimum price for 12 months. I think for processors, I think it's the flip side. Again, I don't think that's something that you can necessarily comment on. Feel free if you'd like to.
Well, it's different. I think that's probably the key, is that it's very unique to us. Not just in dairy, but us compared to everyone else in the world. So it's a very unique system that we do have here. And obviously, you've got the likes of Fonterra in New Zealand and people that are able to move with market movements depending on what's going on. So yeah, it's just a very unique arrangement for us.
Yeah, it is. I think that's an area that needs focus going forward. So for this industry to have a united voice, it has to be a win-win outcome for the majority of the time. I feel the rhetoric over recent years has been either one side, like we're talking sides here, processors or farmers, and one side's winning and the other side's losing. And I think the quicker we can get away from that rhetoric and have getting back to that point around a united voice, the better. But anyway, I don't think we're going to solve that here this morning.
That's right.
You mentioned before just around tech in dairying. I think that's a super interesting area. Do you see how much uptake are you seeing out there for farmers? Things like robotic dairy, robotic milking systems, or herds being ingrained with AI or herd management through apps, etc. How much of that are you seeing out there?
Well, there's a lot of different products out there, first of all, and so there is a lot of focus on that area just from a research and development perspective, and I guess it comes back to that topic around innovation and how do you support farmers in getting the most out of their businesses and what their priorities might be for the business. I think from the taking the robot example, when I was at uni, so Melbourne Uni have got a robotic dairy up near Dookie, where I studied for a little bit, and that was good fun up there.
Yep.
But they've got their robotic dairy, and so that was something that seemed quite fresh at the time. And now you start to see them more and more. And I think from our regional teams, a lot of them, especially in South Australia, for instance, they've been hosting more and more workshop days. So, and they've had a lot more farmers asking them about it and wanting to know more about it, just trying to decide whether it's the best for their system or not. And so they've been organising these workshops to try to get that information to farmers and sort of make sure they've got they've got all the information that they need to make that decision effectively. So there is a lot more of those conversations happening. Anecdotally speaking, there is larger uptake, and we are seeing more and more pop up. As far as sort of, if you kind of take the number of farms that we have, which is just under 4,000, it's only about 3% of farms use automated milking systems. So it's still not a lot, but there is just that increasing number, or that increased uptake effectively of those systems. But you'll talk to some farmers, and for those that maybe have multiple operations, and they don't necessarily say, oh, it's the best system for every farm. It's more really trying to find, okay, well, how does it work for my system, and is it actually going to be beneficial or not?
And it's a significant outlay, right? Any idea what a robotic milking system would cost?
Oh, goodness.
Any idea?
It's a large investment.
Yeah, it's a large investment.
It's a large investment.
Yeah, and you've got to get the payback, and obviously,
that's right.
it's being able to withstand that type of investment with a payback over numerous years. Yep. Yeah, exactly right. Interesting. That is I was surprised by that stat, that only 3%.
Yeah.
Have robotic
dairying.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right, we are getting towards the end of our chat, but it's I do have a few more questions.
Sure.
Crystal ball, bring it out. Mm-hmm. What does the next 10 years look like?
10 years? 10. Oh, my goodness.
You can choose either 5 or 10. You can maybe 5. We'll bring it in a little bit. What does the future of Australian dairying look like over the next 5 years?
It's a very good question. I think we're still in this transitional period, and we have been for quite some time now, but right sizing, trying to find that right balance between processing capacity, how much milk do we have, how many farms do we have, all of those key metrics effectively.
What do we make?
Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, what do we do with the milk? Where is the product going? Even the markets themselves and sort of where we're sending those products has changed dramatically over the last 20 to 30 years. So, and China's a good example of that. So there's a lot that's happened in that time frame, and then obviously, going forward, what does that look like? That's obviously the part that I'm very interested in going forward, because I love the numbers and want to see where things track and where they go. But, I think we're still likely to see this continuing trend that we see right across agriculture in terms of less but larger farms. And so that's something that gradually occurs every season. And when you prepare the data and you have some nice little graphs, you can see the trends quite well. So I think we are likely to continue seeing that. Obviously, every season there's going to be volatility in terms of milk prices that are offered. What are commodity prices doing, or export prices doing? Obviously, the market is going to ebb and flow, and there's going to be those cycles within that. Same with milk production, and same with climate and the impacts of that. I think we're in a period where there are challenges out there in terms of how do we balance the number of farms and the number of cows that we have whilst maintaining increases in milk yield, and that's the challenge. How do you do more with less? That's basically what it comes down to. So I think, there obviously is going to be a bit of ebb and flow there, but there's definitely room for opportunity. And so I think dairy is quite well placed in the sense that, yes, whilst we do have some challenges, it means that we have really key areas that can actually be improved on. So that's probably the positive side of it.
Interesting. Is there much collaboration across the different parts of the world as far as dairying improvement goes? So do you guys engage with Europe much, or the US, or New Zealand, or
Yeah, absolutely.
China.
So not me specifically, but we've got so different teams right across the organisation. So it might be our farm business team who are working with groups in New Zealand. So it might be Dairy NZ, for instance, looking at their engagement with farmers, their programs that they have going. What learnings can we take back from that? We've got people who are focused in the innovation space and looking at technology globally, and in terms of what findings can they bring back for Australian dairy? We've got the trade team who, is very active in market, and it might be China, Japan, Southeast Asia, talking to importers, distributors, obviously very familiar world for you guys.
Yeah, sure.
But, doing a lot of work in that space and bringing back those insights into Australia. So there is a lot of different teams and work that's done within that space, but definitely looking globally to see what can be brought back.
Yeah, it's, I guess, the catalyst for that question is we obviously do quite a bit of business with the US industry as well, and their constant drive. And you mentioned before around productivity of cow and yield per cow, and I think they're unbelievable in doing more with less. You know, the comment you made. Obviously, their farming systems are vastly different from our own.
Yep.
Typically. But do you guys engage specifically with, you know, what they're doing as far as cow management and herd management and how to increase those yields? Is there two-way information between us and the US?
Yeah. So within our research and innovation business unit, which is the business unit that my team lives within, we've got tech leads who are over there who are really focused. It might be on soil and carbon. It might be pasture. It might be the animal side of things. And they're often in those types of markets, engaging with farmers, engaging with different groups to see what they're doing in that space. And that, can help inform some of the decisions and the programs that they design for Australia.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. We are coming towards the end, Eliza, which I'm sure you'll be happy to hear. One last question. Through all your data analytics, et cetera, what is your most surprising stat that you've come across?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I love my numbers, of course. So very hard to pick just one. And it's also interesting because everyone, when you go out and present and you talk to different people, everyone finds something different surprising. I think for me, the key one is we talk about this in our In Focus report, but, back in the 80s, the average herd size was 90 cows and now it's over 300. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit of a mundane stat, but I think for me, it's something that really highlights the historical aspect of the industry. We've obviously been here for a long time. Dairy has got such an important place within this industry. And that stat alone just kind of shows all of those different trends that are at play within the industry. And again, you might be less but larger farms, this broader agricultural trend that we're seeing, and is really just reflective of how businesses themselves have had to change just with the way that the world does. So I've always liked that one.
I agree. I like that stat. And it's also really informative as you put that stat across the world as well, because the average herd size in Europe, as an example, is vastly less than our own. I think it's 75 or 80, depending on the region. Yeah. So they're back to more like our 80s stat, whereas then you go to America and it's well, I don't know what the average is, but it's significantly more than ours. And
much larger.
You get 1,200, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 and plus cow farms, huge which businesses. Are just the scale is just astronomical. Yeah. But that is interesting and does tell a tale, right, of that consolidation. That's right. So we have come to the end of our chat. Once again, thank you very much for coming in and spending time with us today. Was there any thoughts that you'd like to leave on as to where we're going in our dairy world?
Oh, look, I'll just let the world take us. Let's just see where we go. It feels a bit like we need to sort of see how the next 6 months goes. I mean, Trump's going to make some decisions soon.
He'll make some decisions, that is for sure.
I think we need to just get through that first and then see where things are going to go. But look, it's always an interesting time in dairy. And so, I love working in it. I love talking about it. Really, really appreciate you having me on today.
Excellent. Fair enough. Thank you.